Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fridays with Sue and Steph. We have a great topic today. And I have a bunch of stories on this topic. One of them's not mine, but I still feel like it's my right to tell it. But someone else on the call might think it's theirs to tell. So our topic today is, just don't ever call the other mother. When your kid doesn't get invited to the party, it wasn't lost in the mail. Like it's never a good story when you call the other mother. Like, at least in my experience, I know Eka, who's on our team, had a great experience where moms would like agree to tell each other.
Okay.
But I think that is so unique because there's
Yeah.
always two sides to the story. And so I'm going to start with, I actually have 3 of my own stories, and we'll see if I want to tell all of them. Where did I write them down? Who knows where I wrote them down? Anyway, so the first one was when my oldest had a friend group who were the youngest in their family, and that makes all the difference, right? Like you only do these things once, where you kind of say, well, I've heard that you don't call, but I know my story's a little different. So I knew that. I knew I wasn't supposed to call, but a bunch of girls were at my house. A mom came over and picked up all the girls except my daughter to take them to an amusement park. That just seemed wrong. Like, we've been feeding and entertaining these kids all day.
Yeah.
And it just seems so wrong to me. I couldn't get past it. So I said to the mom, who was my friend, that was a little weird. Did something happen? Like, was there a fight or something? And she said, no, you're just way too strict. I didn't want to have your rules. So I was like, what? What am I strict about? She goes, now, here's the thing.
Wait, which child are you saying which child in terms of birth order?
Yeah, so it's my oldest, so I don't know what to do, but all of them,
okay.
All of these other people are with their youngest.
Oh, I'm with you.
So the mentality is so different. So
Totally.
She said, your first question would have been, when are you bringing them home? And I'm like, you're right. I said, you're right. That would have been my question, but I could have made the decision that you didn't have any rules around this and you wanted to go with that freedom. And then I could have said, well, I'll let go of that tonight, or, well, then she can't go. And she was like, yeah, that's fair. So that was as close to a good resolution. Like, neither one of us was mad at the other one, but it was like healthy. But my other one's not so good. So how about yours, Steph?
Yeah, I was going to say, mine. And then
thank you, Deborah Fish, for always being supportive. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Definitely wrong. How rude. Are you kidding me? I'm looking at the comments. Sorry.
You do know I was Deborah Fish's counselor at an overnight camp when we were young. So we have
here's the thing. Like, you're telling that story in retrospect, like, of course, right? Like, you had the oldest and these were the youngest, and it's hard to get back to that headspace. I do remember, when our youngest went to kindergarten, and I remember saying to my husband, like, if she's friends with any firstborn's moms, like, it's just not going to work. Like, I know it's not, because now I'm already past it, but I didn't know that at the time. But I do have a good story about.
Lori says I win. That's not nice. You were better than me.
Okay, that's funny.
Thanks, Lori.
Here's one, Sue, I'm not sure I shared with you. This was a purpose. This was one of those ones that I thought I would have made this call. And when it actually happened, I didn't. Because I guess in my head, it was always like, if it's safety, if they're doing something illegal, blah, blah, blah. So we had a kid where we came home from somewhere, and it was a parent and it was just one of our kids and a friend that had tried alcohol, like had tried beer or something. Okay. I knew how strict that other family was, and that if I told the family, they would come down so hard on this child. And I felt like the infraction, I felt like it was, they weren't 13, they were 16. I felt like there was so much else going on. I felt like it was so innocent. You know what I mean? And I remember, like, even to this day, years later, I'm like, I am so glad I did not make that call.
Well,
it's just such a funny thing. I can't even believe I'm saying it and admitting it on the air. But, like, it was one of those that I'm like, they're going to have such a big reaction to this. And Nobody got in a car. Nobody, like, there were just all these pieces around it that I'm
Words
glad
of
I
that.
didn't do it. I wrestled
Well,
with
I
it.
would say I do remember that how I felt with my firstborn because I got to do it over and over again when I wasn't that mom. And
Yeah.
one person called me. This wasn't even on my list of things to tell, but this is a friend of mine who called me. And again, it was my fourth and her oldest. So it was
Yeah.
the reverse scenario.
Yeah.
And the kids weren't getting along so well. And she wanted us to talk about what we could do to fix it.
Remember?
And I said, yeah, nothing. And she was like so upset. And I said, well,
Yeah.
this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like to be a kid in middle school. And there's nothing we're going to do. We're not going to force the friendship on them. And she, being the mom of the oldest, couldn't let go of it. And
Yeah.
one day she called up and she said, I haven't seen you in a long time. And I said, well, I'm kind of scared of you.
I remember.
And now she's in the reverse position and she calls me up and says, I totally get it. I totally get it. So
But
Sherry
you
says
can't
these are,
until you can, right? Like,
yeah. No, you can't. You always have, I mean, if you have more than one, you have like that firstborn experience. If you only have one, you have to figure out how to be the first, the second, and the youngest. Sherry says these are tough situations that sometimes overlap with adult social relationships. So completely true. So hard. Okay, so I have another one. And this is why I say there's two sides to the story. I got a call from a mom who said one of my kids was bullying, I shouldn't say in quotations. She felt like one of my kids was bullying her kid. But
okay.
I had been hearing the other side of that story for a really long time. That kid was trash talking my kid and walking by and nudging and just doing all those button pushing things that are totally frustrating. And so that mom called me indignantly because her kid was, of course, not a participant and it was all on mine. And then insisted that I talk to my kid, put in place some consequences, and then report back to her. Yeah, that
I
call
can
did
imagine how
not
that
go,
went over.
that call did not go well. Yeah.
It's, it is so hard. I think here's the distinction I will make. Of course we want to make the call, right? It's two things, right? They're both true. We want to make it better. We want to have this whole
How much,
conversation.
Steph? How much do you want to make the call? Okay,
Yeah.
moving to your story. You're not telling it?
We've told it before.
Really?
We have different versions of the story. Okay, because we have all new audiences all the time. Okay,
yeah.
right?
Also,
Yeah,
you guys put in
is,
the chat if you have a story you want to share.
Yeah. So the story is I called Sue, who is almost like a big sister to me because your kids are enough older, and I'd be like, okay, what about this? What about this? And I will go to my grave saying she told me to tell the other mother. Now, there's no way you told me that. I know you didn't tell me that. I, of course, tell the story to my husband. In my version, yeah, Sue thought we should call her, So Todd will also go to his grave because that's the story I told, right?
Can I give another version?
What?
Can I give a different version?
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna.
Okay, so you persisted for so long about calling the other mother that I finally, what I said to you was, if you're going to call, what are you going to say?
Yes.
And you missed the if you're going to call. You just let that go. And you said, we talked about what I should say when I call the other mom. But I knew you were calling the other mom. You would not back down. You were calling the other mom. And then I thought, well, okay, how do you damage control if you're going to call the other mom?
Yeah. Yeah, it never goes. You're right. It never goes well. There is one story. This is so interesting because I think this is going to be, I hope that this is okay to tell this story. I think it is. I didn't make the call. My husband made the call.
Ooh.
Right.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
My husband is way better at conflict than I am. He's good. Like, he's really good. I happened to be out of town. Now, I could have called for an Uber, but he was in the headspace and dealing with it and also had access to that child. So, but it was a call. It was a safety related call, and it was actually very well received. Very well received.
Well, I do make I also have a line, which is if there's a safety issue, I'm going to make the call. I also know it may impact my friendship, but I don't care. because
Yes.
I want to do the thing that gives your kid every chance and not find out later that something really went south and I didn't make that call. So
yeah.
but, I just want to share.
And we talked about it for a while, like, do we, don't we? And we were like, okay, it's got to be done.
Yeah, right. So I think that one's hard for me to look away from because it's like you could make a difference.
Agreed,
So,
Deborah.
So I just want to share Sherry, but she's got one about here. Let me put it up. So Sherry has one about. Oh, Sherry, I don't even know what to say about that. So yeah, I would have wanted to. Well, as you said, Steph, we all want to. We all want all the parents.
That's not the issue.
We know.
Let's give people permission. We want to make the call.
Right. Well, also, I think it's like we're so sure how it's going to play out that the person is going to be so grateful.
I know.
That we shared, but it just doesn't go that way. And Sherry has made calls about teens in danger, and I guess like we do all have to kind of make the decision for ourselves. But I think that one has I have a little more clarity about that one.
Yeah. I think danger is such a funny word because Sherry, here's what I'll say about that. That call that I didn't make, I felt like that child was going to be in more danger by telling the parents than my having a conversation in the household. Like, hey, we don't do this in the house. It's our house rules. Like it or not, we don't do it.
Yeah, so Sherry, I agree with you. Sherry says they're tough calls, but my daughter shared about friends who were talking about self-harm, and you called people you didn't know, which is really brave. And I think that's like being part of a village, that we do that. I think the interpersonal calls, like my kid didn't get invited to the party, or you didn't take my kid on the trip with you, or any of those things, like it's probably us. I know the one that I made the call on, I was so enraged by the injustice of that I was seeking justice. And maybe that's not the best motive.
Yeah, right. I have a good one I just thought of.
Whoa, go for it.
I totally forgot about it. I was the recipient of the call. So one of our kids he was in high school, one of the boys, and he was probably a junior in high school, senior, can't remember, and came down one morning and he said, you're going to get a call from so-and-so. And I'm like, okay. He said, a bunch of us were there last night. One of the kids got really sick. Parents came home. Kid was throwing up, the whole thing. The kid just gave me a heads up. Mom is, having him call all the parents who were there. That was like part of his punishment or whatever. And my kid said to me, he's like, please just go easy on him. Please don't. And I'm like, do you know me? I'm like, first of all, I so will appreciate that call. And I don't think there's much for me to say. I'm just going to listen, So the kid called me and just said, here's what happened. I'm so sorry. It was not responsible. And I put your kid in danger, my friend, your kid in danger, da, da, da.
He had the script. He had a
script. And I said, I really appreciate the call. It sounds like, you understand what happened and, you'll learn from it. Thanks for the call. That was it. Right.
Yeah.
But I could see being that mom. I could totally, because I was like, oh my God, like that is so something I would do. Like be like, okay,
yeah, I mean, your kid did it to me when something broke at my house from playing rough, and your kid sent an apology that I think might have been driven by a mother.
Totally.
I have told my kids, you fix that problem. Like, I don't even care I don't need to be part of it, but I do not want to hear more about the problem. If I felt like the kid was even sometimes when they weren't in the wrong, I just felt like sometimes it's worth it to just make it okay and not have it live on. Okay, Shannon, I feel your pain because my community was all my friends and their kids overlapping. And when those friendships broke up, so Shannon says, I've stopped cultivating close relationships with my daughter's friends' moms because these teenage friendships are always changing and had a very painful experience. Yeah, I feel the exact same way. It's really hard and it seeps into our friendships.
Yeah.
Okay, Pamela says, my folks were don't ask, don't tell parents, so they never knew about the mom in town who let us all come to her house to party. Then I saw the mom drunk and having a confrontation with a cop who showed up at the house one Saturday night. I'm now 54 and I've never forgotten how ashamed my teen self was of her. My own daughter is far more discerning when adults or their kids are just making very poor choices. Sometimes letting kids observe the bad examples themselves speaks much louder. That is really, I remember those things also. I really do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I think it's interesting. These things, even just looking as I'm reading people's comments, and they cut deep, right? I mean, you remember them, and I think it's that was a really interesting comment, Pam, because I do think it's so interesting as our kids, as they get to be later teenagers and into college, and starting to see them assess, if you will, situations is fascinating. What they take away from it. It's funny. My husband in recent years will tell stories about like growing up in the neighborhood, and this one he's like, oh, you know what? Now looking back, wait a minute, like kind of like what Pam just said. Todd's like, oh yeah, she was drunk all the time. The mother, right? Like all of a sudden he's like piecing it together.
well, I mean, I had a moment where, like the house that was providing alcohol for the kids, the parents were buying it every week. And I thought it was my job to call the cops on them. I did not, thank God. But like, until I don't know the outrage of and feeling indignant about the way other people did things, when really the only
Yeah.
thing I can control is what's going on in my own house.
Yeah.
Even barely.
That's I'm just gonna
Right.
say, I always say to friends, especially those with younger kids, they'll ask me something, and I'm like, all you can control is what's in your own house. I'm like, and you actually can't even control that. So like you're so many layers away.
Yeah.
Todd
Yeah.
had this story of a kid in the neighborhood growing up, and I met Todd when I was 18, and I was always here about this house. They had the best snacks. They had the best snacks. They had the best snacks. Fast forward years later, Todd, my close friend, whom grew up around the corner from Todd, and that's how I met her. We're in a conversation maybe like 5 years ago, and all of a sudden my friend says to Todd, like, she was high all the time. She had the munchies. My Todd story was they had the best snacks. I'm like, oh my God, this is such a funny conversation.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And I guess, there's no hard and fast rules, and everybody has to decide for themselves. But in the social dynamic of teenage kids, calling the parents, in my experience, has not paid off at all. 2 thumbs down. Yeah. Have a good week, everybody.